why did my child cut me off? My adult child, he cut me off. And I realized after replaying, rethinking, trying to find the answer, I've been searching in all the wrong places. This is where many of us get stuck. This is where we get obsessed with trying to find the one thing that could have possibly turned it off, right? Cut us off. The mistake, the conversation, the accusation, the the dynamics that maybe all make sense and can add up for us and point to this is why they cut us off, right? And and believe me, I mean, my last conversation with him, there were no sirens, there were no back and forth or arguments or a big blowout or anything. I can't even say it was a heated discussion. We were definitely exchanging, definitely talking, but not so much about us as much as frustrations and things that were going on in his life and how to work through it and sharing thoughts and possibilities and just trying to work through some things, right? But nothing ever really said this was it. This was the reason why he cut me off, right? Because the discussion wasn't about us. It wasn't about me. It was about things that he was dealing with. For me, um, I think that I got obsessed with trying to find the why, right? The why, as I said, became my wound. And the reason it became my wound is because I was obsessed. Um, you know, it wasn't so much about the estrangement anymore. It wasn't so much about the distance, but it was not knowing, not knowing the answer. Because if you feel like if you know the answer, then you can fix it, right? You can backtrack. If something is needed, like an apology, you can do that, right? But I was struggling with what could it be? I didn't know. I didn't know. For me, I thought we had a very good relationship. We talked every single day. We discussed things from one end of the earth to the other, right? These were the things that seem all normal to me, right? And I realize as I keep revisiting and keep replaying, no matter what year I'm replaying, no matter what memory or vacation or holiday or birthday or anything like that, right? I am still not finding that one thing. And that was my aha moment, not finding the one thing, because it made me realize that it's not a one thing. Relationships are made up of thousands of interactions, thousands of discussions, um, all years and years of building memories, not just between the two of you, but with everyone else, all the other family, extended family. Um, you know, the dynamics that we built around holidays, traditions, all those things, right? And it's almost like a movie is playing, the emotions are going on. You see people laughing, you see people talking, you see the engagement, right? As you're replaying everything, and you realize this is this is everything. The estrangement is about everything. And because I was just as much a part of the movie as he was, that, I am experiencing these times, these experiences, the way I am feeling, the way my emotions are, where I'm having at the moment. And he is experiencing it out of the lens of where he is and what he is processing. And that's why a lot of times people could be at the same place at the same time. And if you were to speak to them independently, you realize that they experienced it differently than the way you experienced it. And because you don't know that that's what's going on, this goes on for years. This goes on and on and on, right? And I ask myself now, my question isn't so much the why, but how long has the relationship been off track? How long has the two different experiences been going on? How long, you know, can I say when I reflect that there was a possible misinterpretation, or maybe the way things were being processed, or the memories, or some other interjection that also played a role? How long? And so, you can get caught up there as well. But, but suddenly I realized that the magnitude of why was the magnitude of our relationship, the magnitude of years and years and years, right? And I'm not sure, you know, when it went off track, or when things began to feel like something was different, or he was processing something different, right, than the way I was thinking he was processing it, right? So, you're building a relationship on something that maybe the relationship wasn't built on at all, right? So now you have to go back and revisit those things. Um, you know, I always say that what this did for me, when I, sat down and really thought about why did he cut me off, my adult child, after many years. I mean, we didn't go through spells of not speaking to each other. We didn't go through spells of fighting. We didn't go through spells of, you know, uh, outbreaks, or being off Discord. Like I said once in the other video, was that we had a relationship that friends admired. They thought that we had something special because, there was always open communication. There was always interaction. You know, they were, he was always included. And, it just never seemed like anything was off track. So, to say that I'm blindsided, for me, from my experience, from what I am trying to process with this cutoff, the estrangement, I'm blindsided. I don't know why. I still don't know why. But I know now it's not just one thing. It can't be just one thing. One thing does not turn off the lights, doesn't turn things around totally like that, or it turns a switch off. One thing doesn't do that. So this is something that is tied to, you know, something that I didn't process, and that he processed, that I didn't experience, but he was experiencing, and I didn't, and I missed it, right? And and it may be at the time he didn't know either, right? But as you grow up and you become adult and you start processing from an adult mindset, right? Or from life experiences, right? Then that plays a role in what was being processed in previous years. Um, you know, I'm losing my breath trying to explain this, but I think it's important to talk about because, like they said, there's so many of us who are dealing with estrangement. There's so many of us who have been cut off, cut out. Uh, there's distance between us, or there's no more talking, there's no discussion. They call that the no contact. Um, I can check all those boxes. No contact parent, the estranged parent, I'm estranged from my adult child. And this is all because of experiences, or an experience, or something that has taken place, or has taken place over time, that I didn't experience, right? And so I think it's unfair to say it was a why, because now I know the why is not the why, right? You may not be able to even explain the why. You may not even know the why. They may not even know the why, because now It's all about feelings. Now it's all about emotions. Now it's all about the memories, right? And the memories of your emotions, not the memories of the exact, but what you experienced in that memory, right? So if my experience is not his experience, there'll never be an alignment. There'll never be where I can put my finger on it, right? You know, I think back to trying to see if there were comments that I missed. Maybe, maybe expressions that weren't taken in the light that maybe it should have been taken in, right? Maybe there was an expectation and I didn't even realize there was an expectation, right? And then, like I said, the interactions, sometimes you ever talked with someone or had a conversation and you could be 5 minutes into the conversation and they think you're talking about one thing and you're talking about another thing. And it's not until something is said specifically that somebody says, wait a minute, what are you talking about? Right? And how do I know that's not what we're dealing with? But what I am sure about in this moment, in this time, that the why is not a simple answer. The why is not as clean cut as a one-time event. The event is the estrangement, right? But the estrangement is the result of what led up to having to go estranged, right? And how long was that? What was it? When was it? How many years? Because we're talking about an adult child is cutting you off, not when they were a child, not when you're raising them. Not for me anyway, right? And when I think about my relationship when I was raising him and very much a part of each other's world, right? Nothing indicated that this is where the direction of the relationship was going. Nothing spoke to that. You know, um, I had someone say to me not too long ago that, you know, they shrugged their shoulders because they said, I was there. I saw for myself. I don't know what it could be. Right. And so, and that's not to disregard the choice or the decision. I'm just still wrestling with me. I'm still wrestling with trying to understand, right? But this part has helped me loosen up some internal knots, emotions about the why. Because, you want to feel like you're also not taking responsibility for the why, right? Because if you knew the why, and if it was something that you could have control over to fix, control over to, undo or make better or move on or create a whole different experience even, you would do it, right? But because that why can't be answered by a simple answer, we're talking about time and how much time. What's the block of time? When did the clock begin? All of that span is what equated to the estrangement, right? And so the disconnect is the real issue, not the estrangement. The real issue is when did we have the disconnect? And how long did we function out of that disconnect? And, what was it that maybe could have brought about awareness to, oh my goodness, this caused a disconnect? Because for me, I don't know the answer to that either. But what I do feel better about is that um, it wasn't it wasn't just something that happened out of the sky, out of the blue sky, and that, I'm being punished or penalized for a mistake. Um, and, that's a much bigger discussion, just like the why is a much bigger uh, a bigger entity than just a question. It's the magnitude of the time and the relationship and the miss and the experience. Those are all the factors, all of the variables that will be the accumulation of the why, right? The we can't put your finger on just one thing, and it would be an injustice to put your finger just on one thing. You're talking about your child. You're talking about a relationship. You're talking about years of interactions, love expressions, um, things that have taken place, not taken place, life. Life has a way of lifing. And, how did they process that, right? And you're thinking everything's okay, and you realize that maybe it didn't get processed properly, right? Um, there was a miss, right? There was a miss. Um, will I ever find out that miss? I don't know. But for some reason, I feel better that the why is much bigger than a one-time entity or something that could have been addressed. But, this is my journey, right? Being a parent of an estranged adult child. And now I have the right to, understand my journey as a parent who's estranged from their adult child. And just as he's an adult, this was his choice. He's made his choice for a reason or reasons. And that's his journey. He is an adult. But I am still looking at what's a part of now my experience at this time of my life. So I hope this has helped you in some way. I feel good talking about it. You can't talk about this with anyone. People have to be in this walk, in this journey, to know your journey, to know the feelings that you're harboring, to know the frustration and the questions that you have, all the answers that you don't have. And so I thank you for your time. And I'll follow up with more questions that I still don't have answers to. But I thank you for being here. Before I go, please subscribe to the channel. I also welcome your comments, and please share with someone else you may know who may also want to be part of this community. As a free gift, please scan the QR code to take the 7-question 2-minute quiz to receive your Dawn card of where you are in this journey. Thank you.